Pastor Steve here. Just wanted to drop in and give a little nugget on evangelism. When we think about evangelism, we think about the Apostle Paul, who was the greatest evangelist to ever walk the planet outside of Jesus Christ. And when we think about the Apostle Paul, we recognize that he knew his audience when he was speaking, and he varied his approach based on that audience. He never changed the core message of the gospel. It was always centered on Jesus one way or another. But the way he contextualized how he went about reaching his audience differed based on where he was. In Acts 13, he goes into a synagogue, and the Jewish rulers there, his kinsmen in the faith, they ask for him to share a word of encouragement, and he gets up and he preaches this big long sermon, hitting so much of the relationship of God to his people throughout covenant history, all to show how they culminate through promise and prophecy in the person of Jesus Christ, that Jesus Christ of Nazareth was the fulfillment of all those things, and therefore that his fellow kinsmen in the faith should believe upon Jesus. Well, 4 chapters later, we see Paul in a different context. He's in Athens, and they bring him up to the Areopagus, this place where a lot of Greek philosophers would sit around and contemplate how God relates to his world. And the Apostle Paul doesn't preach a big long sermon in their presence chronicling the covenant relations God has had with his people, Israel, in the past. Instead, he relates to them as a philosopher. He says, you know, the God who made this world and everything in it, he is Lord of heaven and earth. And he's not served by human hands as though he needs anything. He's not confined to temples. Instead, he gives all mankind life and breath and everything. And in doing that, he speaks really the philosophical language that would be very meaningful to them as he contextualizes what God has done through the person of Christ. He begins to say how God has appointed one man who will judge every man, and he gives evidence to that one man by saying that he is raised from the dead. Well, Jesus Christ is the only man who has ever been raised from the dead bodily to continue in this world, and so it sets him apart. But the reason I draw attention to these 2 chapters is to show that, you know, the Apostle Paul, he had a way of reaching his audience the way that they need to reach it. He didn't have a one-size-fits-all approach, but to the philosophers, he kind of philosophized with them and showed them how really they need to think deeply about the God who is a creator, who has sent Jesus as a redeemer. And then to his fellow kinsmen in the faith, the Jewish brothers who may have been a part of the rebellion in Jerusalem that crucified Jesus and God raised him from the dead, they need to rethink how Jesus fits into the Old Testament story. And so it's incumbent upon us, as we think about people in our lives that we want to engage and talk about Christ with, we need to, first of all, we need to know them and know how they think, so that we can maybe best articulate and best language the ways that God has worked through Jesus Christ and what that central message of the gospel is in a way that's accessible to them, that they can hear it. And so that is a challenge for you and I as witnesses to the gospel.